7th graders, welcome to Chapter 2. In Chapter 2, Lesson 1, the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be finding the percent of a number. So our objective is to find the percent of a number. So any percent of any number, that's what we're going to be able to find. The standards that we're going to be addressing is 7th grade ratios and proportions, standard number 3, 7th grade equivalent expressions, standard number 3 as well. Let's go ahead, start a vocab, start this lesson. Alright, well, no vocab for this lesson. We're just going to go ahead and start this lesson. Example 1 says find 5% of 300 by writing the percent as a fraction. So first thing is you need to know what the word of in mathematics means. It says find 5% of 300. The word of in mathematics means to multiply. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply 5% times 300 to figure out our answer. Well, we know that every percent in the world is out of 100. So we're going to start by writing the fraction 5 out of 100. And of means we're going to multiply by 300. So, if we want to actually figure this out, what we're going to do is we're going to take 5 out of 100 and times it by 300. But if we want to make this work really, really well, what we want to do is we want to put 300 over 1. And this means we have a fraction times a fraction. And whenever we have a fraction times a fraction, we just multiply straight across. 5 times 300, that's 1,500. 100 times 1, that's 100. So, 5% of 300 is really 1,500 divided by 100. Well, since I have 0 on top, 0 on bottom, those cancel out. 15 divided by 1, that's 15. So, 5% of 300 is the number 15. And that's my answer for this problem. If I were to take 15 out of 300, I should see the decimal for 5%. So I have my calculator right here. 15 divided by 300, I get 0.05, which is 5% as a decimal. I know my answer is correct. Well, let's keep moving. In example 2, we're going to find 8% of 125. We're going to set it up by writing a fraction of 8%. Well, that's 8% out of 100. So we're going to make it 8 over 100. And the word of in mathematics means times. So we're going to multiply by 125. Again, we're going to make it a fraction and a fraction, so we're going to put this over the denominator of 1. And now we're just going to multiply straight across. 8 times 125, 8 times 100 is 800. 8 times 25, well, if I have 8 quarters, I have $2. So really, that's 800 plus 200, which is 1,000. So I have 1,000. 100 times 1, that's 100. So if I want to know what 8% of 125 is, all I have to do is take 8% times 125, but I wrote 8% as a fraction out of 100. Since we have zeros on top and bottom, we can cancel those zeros out. So the fraction we're really looking at is 10 divided by 1. And 10 divided by 1 is 10. So if I got 10 out of 125, I should get 8% as my answer. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in my calculator. 10 divided by 125. Then I get 0.08, which is 8% as a decimal. So I know my answer is correct. The answer that I'm looking for is 10. 10 is 8% of 125. In example 3, we're going to find 25% of 180 by writing the percent as a decimal this time. So what we were working on before was writing the percent as a fraction out of 100. Now we're just going to change it to a decimal. So whenever you have a percent and you want to change it to a decimal, all you got to do is divide it by 100. And if you were to divide it by 100, what really happens is you write the number 25, that's our percent, and what you do is you move the decimal 2 places to the left. So 25% as a decimal is the decimal 0.25. And if you want to check it, take it in your calculator. Take 25, divide by 100, and you should also see the decimal 0.25. And 0.25 is 25% as a decimal. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the decimal this time, and we're going to multiply it by 180. So we're going to take 0.25 times 180 to get our answer in this problem. I'm going to go ahead and use a calculator for this section. 0.25 times 180 equals 45. So 45 is my answer. What we need to do is we need to take 0.25 times 180 and get our answer, and that number should be 25% of 180. So if you check it, all you got to do is type in your calculator 45 divided by 180 and see if you get 0.25, and if you do, that means you got 25% of that number. And I checked it, and I do get that number. Let's keep moving. In example 4, we're going to find 20% of 75 by changing it to a decimal as we did in the previous problem. So first thing, if I were to do 20 divided by 100, I know in reality that means I'm taking 20% and I'm going to move the decimal 2 places to the left. So 20 out of 100 is really the decimal 0.20 or 0.2. So this right here represents 20% as a decimal. We're going to multiply it by 75. Now I'm going to teach you how to do this without a calculator. So I'm going to teach you how to actually multiply these and get the answer without a calculator. So we have 75, and we're going to times it by 0.20. Well, you multiply it like normal. So 0 times 5, that's 0. 0 times 7, that's 0. Now, starting the next number, we're going to put a 0 here. 2 times 5, that's 10. Carry the 1. 2 times 7, that's 14. Add 1, that's 15. And you go ahead and add those. You get 0, 0, 5, 1. Now, in order to actually get your right answer, you have to count how many numbers are behind the decimal. Well, there's 2 numbers behind the decimal. So what that means is you take your decimal from here and move it 2 spaces in. So this means that 15 is 20% of 75. And we can go ahead and check that in our calculator by typing exactly the same thing. We can type in our calculator 0.20 times 75 and see if it gives us 15. And I got 15, which is exactly right. So I know that the answer I got when multiplying is the same answer I got when using a calculator to check my work. And that's how we do it. If we didn't have a calculator, all we have to do is count how many times we're going to move the decimal back in our final answer. So we're going to move the decimal back 2 spaces because there's 2 numbers behind the decimal. If there was 3 numbers behind the decimal, we'd move it 3 spaces back into the problem. Let's keep moving. All right, in example 5, we're going to find 120% of 75 by writing that percent as a fraction and then solving it the same way that we did earlier problems. So in this case, we're looking at a percent that's bigger than 100. And it is possible to have percents bigger than 100. So we're going to take 120, and as we said earlier, every percent in the world is still out of 100. So it's 120 out of 100%. The word of in mathematics we talked about means times 75, and now all we got to do is put that 75 over 1. I'm going to go ahead and use a calculator to help me with my math real quick, and I'm just going to multiply straight across. 120 times 75, that equals 9,000. 100 times 1 is 100. And now if I take these and I divide them, I have zeros here, they can cancel out. I really have 90 divided by 1. So 90 divided by 1 is 90. So this is kind of like one of those examples that if I had 75 questions on a test and I had 120%, I got 90 questions right because 75 of those questions counted towards the 100, but 90 of those questions being right gave me 120 because I got the extra credit. So if I had 90 out of 75, 90 divided by 75, you get the decimal 1.20. And if you wanted to change that to percent, all you got to do is times that by 100, and you would have 120%. So 90 is our correct answer. It's 120% of 75. Let's try another one that deals with percents over 100. In example 6, we're going to be figuring out 125% of the number 64. Again, we're going to do it by changing that percentage to a fraction. Since it's a fraction, I'm going to make 125 divide by 100, because every percent in the world will always divide by 100%. The word of means times. We're going to multiply it by 64, and we can put 64 over 1 to make it a fraction times a fraction. When we have a fraction times a fraction, all we got to do, multiply straight across. So I'm going to use my calculator to help me with my multiplication across. I got 125 times 64. And I get 8,000. 100 times 1, that's 100. And now all I have to do, zeros on top cancel out. And 80 divided by 1 is 80. So this means that if I got 80 questions right on a test of 64, which means I got extra credit, then I get 125% on that quiz or that test. So I could check it by typing in my calculator, 80 divided by 64, and my answer should be 1.25. And that's exactly what I get, which means this is 125% written as a decimal. So since I checked it and I got the right answer, I know that this is correct. Let's try changing this percent into a decimal and see what happens. In example 7, we're going to be finding 150% of 28 by writing the percent as a decimal. So since we're writing it as a decimal, we're actually going to make it a fraction and change that fraction to a decimal. 150 is 150 divided by 100. And if I type that in the calculator, 150 divided by 100, I will get the decimal of 1.5. So I'm going to take 1.5 of 28. So I'm going to do it without a calculator this time. I'm going to take 28 times 1.5. First thing I'm going to do is multiply the 5. 5 times 8, that's 40. 5 times 2, that's 10. Add 4, that's 14. I'm going to put a 0 because now I'm in this position. 1 times 8, that's 8. 1 times 2, that's 2. And I'm going to go ahead and add these. I get 0. 4 plus 8, that's 12. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1, that's 2. 2 plus 2, that's 4. And since I have one number behind the decimal, I'm going to move the decimal back one spot. So that's 42.0, which is really the number 42. So 42 should be 150% of 28. Let's go ahead and check it by actually typing in our calculator, 1.5 times 28. And in fact, I do get 42. So I know that 42 is the correct answer. It is 150% of 28. In example 8, we're going to be solving 210% of 30 by writing that percent as a decimal, kind of like what we did before. To write it as a decimal, we're going to divide it by 100 again. We have 210 divided by 100. The same thing happens as we're really just taking 210% and moving the decimal from here 2 spots over. So it's going to be 2.1 is the number we're going to multiply by. So we're going to take 30 and times it by 2.1. 1 times 0, that's 0. 1 times 3, that's 3. Put a 0 because you're in the second spot. 2 times 0, that's 0. 2 times 3, that's 6. And then you add 0, 3, 6. Now, all you have to do now is count how many numbers are behind the decimal. Well, there's one number behind the decimal, so that means all you do is move the decimal one spot in. So 63 should be our number because it's 63.0. So 63 should be 210% of 30. All we got to do, check. Type in our calculator. 2.1 times 30. And in fact, I do get 63. So I know that 63 is 210% of 30, and that's the correct answer. We're on to our final question. In our final question, we're going to be using this graph about a survey about how many TVs somebody has in their house. So 2% of students have no TVs in their house. 9% of students have one TV in their house. 17% 2. 23% 3. 20% 4. 25% more than 4. So we're saying 5 or more. So it says, refer to the graph. If 275 students took the survey, this survey here about how many TVs they have in their house, how many can be expected to have 3 TVs? So the only piece of information we need to actually look at from this graph is the amount of 3 TVs. So look at 3 TVs, and we see that there's 23% of students have 3 TVs. And again, it's 23% of. So we're really taking 23% of 275. So that's what we're going to figure out. Well, since it's 23%, I'm going to make it 23 out of 100 equals, or not equals, but times 275 over 1. So I'm going to use the fraction method because I like that method. So I'm going to type in my calculator, 23 times 275. I get 6,325. So 6,325. 100 times 1. That's 100. And I know that whenever I divide by 100, that means I take a decimal here and I move it 2 spots over. So that means I get 63.25 students would have 3 TVs in their house. Now, I'm not going to have 63 and 0.25 of a student. So I'm actually going to round this to a whole number since I'm talking about a person. So I'm going to say, is this whole number closer to 63 or is this whole number going to be closer to 64? 63.25, it's closer to 63. So I would say about 63 out of 275 students have 3 TVs in their house. So in my answer, about 63 out of 275 students have 3 TVs in their house based off of the fact that 3 TVs is 23%. So I used 23% of 275. You guys did awesome for this lesson. Make sure you like this video. It's a very short lesson. Everything's here ready for you to go. If you haven't smashed that notification bell, smash that notification bell so you can know when these videos get posted. And I will see you tomorrow.